Thank you everybody for coming, and I just want to thank the Féile for asking me. I love getting back and asked to doing stuff in Derry, so thank you very much. I'm just going to do a wee introduction here for Susan. I'm sure most of you know Susan, but if you don't, Susan is, he said, is one of the most foremost journalists in the country. She used to work at the Sunday Tribune under the weird and wonderful Vincent Browne, and then she has written a number of books. The book we're going to talk about tonight is Northern Protestants on Shifting Ground, which is the second in a series. The first was the 1998 book Northern Protestants and Unsettled People. Susan has made TV documentaries, podcasts. She founded the Belfast Rape Crisis Centre. She was the CEO of the National Women's Council in Ireland. So she's been busy, and she's been good enough to come to Pilot's Row tonight. So that's Susan, and I'm Aoife from the Irish Examiner. So I'm just going to kick off. Me and Susan had a wee chat earlier, and she said that she wanted to start by talking about her friend who died in Derry, Lyra McKay. And we all know what happened to Lyra McKay. And I just wanted to ask, was it when you were writing the book and you said that Lyra represented to you the first person who you had never considered their religion before? And what was that? What age were you when that happened? What was that like?
Well, it was. I don't know whether she was the first person or not. Before I answer that, I have to say that it's quite daunting to be interviewed by Aoife, because Aoife was hardly launched in the Republic when she became the sort of the most feared journalist in the country by the politicians, at any rate. You know, because she practically brought the government down within a month of getting her first major job. So, but it's fantastic to be being questioned by her. But when I walked in, I thought, this looks like an exam hall. And then I saw Aoife sitting down, and I thought, I'm the only one who has to do this bloody exam, you know. We did agree beforehand we wouldn't swear, actually. So sorry about that. Yeah, the thing with Lyra was that I just started, you know, I was friendly with Lyra. We weren't close friends or anything, but we kind of liked each other, and she was half my age, you know. But I'd known her for quite a while, and I think I must have vaguely assumed she was Protestant, but it never really occurred to me to think about it. And then one day she said something that sort of suggested that she must be a Catholic. And it really struck me that it had not occurred to me to work out what she was, because certainly for my generation of Derry person or Northern Irish person, you do that.
Yeah.
You know, you do it. And you were saying, Aoife, that even at your age, you used to do it.
I mean, I'm 30, and I was telling Susan that when I went to university and I got put into halls with a girl from Belfast in university, and I spent the first 3 days trying to work out if she was a Catholic or a Protestant. And it wouldn't have bothered me either way, but you had this internal thing that you needed to know.
But I think it is a measure of Lyra that she was a very special person, and she was very unique in that way. So there might have been an element of that about it, that it was just the way she was, that didn't occur to you to think about her in that way.
And you've done a lot of interviews in the book with younger people, younger Protestants, or you know, if they call themselves Protestants or unionists or Lundies now. But do you think that trying to find out whether someone is a Catholic or a Protestant thing is going away? Did you notice that with the younger people you interviewed?
I think it really is going away. I mean, when I brought out the first book in 2000, Northern Protestants and Unsettled People, afterwards, you know, reactions to it were quite mixed, and it would probably be fair to say that it was more popular with nationalists and Republicans than with unionists, although I did also get a lot of reaction from people from a Protestant background who kind of said that they were glad to find that there were other dissenting Protestants around, you know. But so this time around, I decided I was actually going to go and seek out Lundies, you know, people who... No, what I was going to say is, after that book came out, I was called a Lundy. Yeah. You know, I was told that I was a traitor, basically, and everybody from Derry knows Lundy. The cover of the book is a photograph of Lundy, the effigy of Lundy that's burned in December, and the photograph is by the great Derry photographer Trevor McBride. And Lundy was the governor of Derry during the siege of 1689, and he thought that the city couldn't withstand a prolonged siege, that it was just going to be too much hardship for the people, and that they would be better to negotiate a surrender. And of course, we all know then the apprentice boys thought differently, and they closed the gates, and that whole thing of no surrender, and we will not give an inch, and we will keep the gates closed and everything, has continued to be at the centre of unionism ever since. But in this book, I found that more and more, especially young people, but not only young people, especially young women who were raised by feminist mothers, I have to say, were not interested in that kind of narrowness. And, they're not interested in being part of a politics that is so exclusive that it doesn't leave you room to have your own imagination. So more and more, I found that there are people who are cheerfully embracing the idea of being a Lundy and of being, practicing your religion if you want to practice your religion, enjoying whatever you feel you've taken from your Protestant background, but not going along with this notion that you have to walk on this narrow, narrow path.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, I noticed in the book as well, you obviously made an effort to speak to a lot of women, and especially working class loyalist women, because I feel even working in politics, women's voices are always, secondary demands, even though we've seen this the whole way through the pandemic and whatever else, that when it comes to politics, the women are always on the back foot. And you also speak to, gay people, gender non-conforming people throughout the book, and people of colour. And do you think that is I don't say the future of unionism, but do you see that as the future of whatever unionism is going to become?
Well, it's where we are. It's where Northern Ireland is, where the north of Ireland is, where the north is. It's a very, very mixed community. And the reason I wrote The Unsettled People, the first book, was partly because I just felt that I was working as a journalist in the Republic at the time, and I just felt people in the south just didn't know enough about Northern Protestants. They knew about Reverend Ian Paisley, and generally speaking, they were afraid of him or despised him or felt that he represented a very negative sort of politics. And I knew from being from a Protestant background here, from knowing lots of people here, that wasn't the full picture, But this time around, I definitely think things have changed very much over the 20 years in between the two books. People are much more... it's extraordinary the extent to which we are actually a mixed people. The old binary doesn't work anymore, and nor should it, because we can never have any kind of reconciled society, whether it's within Northern Ireland or within a unified Ireland, unless those barriers go and people stop thinking in terms of them and us and male and female and Protestant and Catholic. The binaries don't serve us well and never have. And there are new communities here. There's lots of people from a Polish, Lithuanian, Eastern European background. There's lots of Africans here many of them are practicing different kinds of Protestant religion that haven't been in Northern Ireland before. So it is a very diverse community, and I think quite a relaxed community, which is the opposite of what you'd think from solely following unionist politics, which is all about crisis and all about panic at the moment.
Yeah, the writer Sarah Creighton said to me once that unionism in the media and what you see is nearly like a caricature of what Protestant people or unionist people really are. We just see the kind of shouting and roaring and, the marching, and that people get into, especially in the south. They have this, caricature, and in England as well, anytime, the DUP get into government, someone digs out the quotes about how old the earth is and all this sort of stuff, and it becomes like a caricature. And I just wanted to ask about what I took away from a lot of the people, not the more progressive people that you spoke to, but the people who are maybe a lot more traditional. You spoke to a lot of people from the TUV and other parties like that, and a lot of them had serious issues with the Good Friday Agreement. And I think we live in, Susan both live in Dublin, and the Good Friday Agreement is held up every day when they're talking about Brexit as this totemic thing. It was the best thing we ever done. But for a lot of people, they felt very, very left behind by the Good Friday Agreement. And a lot of people, I noticed, I have quotes written down, but people said that it created a two tribes mentality. Do you agree with that?
I think there are problems with the Good Friday Agreement, and that is one of them. The fact that, I think what happened with the Good Friday Agreement was it was essentially a peace settlement, but it needed to develop. It needed to be a kind of a living process, instead of which it got fixed. But I do think there's a lot of bad faith among a lot of the unionists who talk about the Good Friday Agreement as having failed them, because the reality is the DUP never supported the Good Friday Agreement, and in some ways I think that they latched onto Brexit the way that they did because they wanted to bring the Good Friday Agreement down. They wanted a hard border. A woman in Mid-Ulster said to me, I said, why? She didn't vote herself DUP, but she said everybody that she knew and everybody in her family did vote DUP and always had and always would. And I said, why did they vote for Brexit? And she said, a border as hard as you can get and a wall to keep the foreigners out. And she said that was the way they saw it, And I do think, that was a lot of the thinking behind going for Brexit, was that it would, because Brexit has really damaged the network of relationships that was set up by the Good Friday Agreement, which heavily relied upon the European Union. Yeah. So, it has damaged the relationships between the North and South in Ireland. It has damaged relationships between the North and England. It has damaged relationships between everybody, really. And I think that's what they wanted. But now they're seeing that it has damaged life for everybody here in a way that they hadn't anticipated, because they kept on holding out for the hardest possible version of it.
And in that vein, do you think unionism is now dying?
I think that's going to be the headline for the event if I answer it directly, so I probably won't.
You're being very diplomatic.
I wrote a piece for the New York Times recently, and they put this incredibly diplomatic headline on it: Northern Ireland is finished. But, in fairness, I suppose that is what I was arguing. I do have a feeling that, unionism should have realised that the old regime of a century ago, like this is supposed to be the centenary of the Northern Irish state, that is never coming back. The days when you could gerrymander a situation so that Derry, which was a Catholic majority city, was run by unionists, that you could have a parliament which was always going to be Protestant dominated. At the moment, we've got a situation where there's going to be a census out next year which will probably show a nationalist majority in the north, or at least half and half. I think already it's only in the over 60s that there is a substantial Protestant majority. And at school age, it's definitely a Catholic majority. Yeah. You've got no longer a unionist majority at Stormont, and the DUP had a chance to be in a dominant position at Westminster and blew it. So I think that the day has passed when they had the opportunity to be generous, and they weren't generous. They weren't willing to share Northern Ireland. And even, I think, if you look at the sort of panic-stricken politics of the last couple of years, it's all very much been sort of, even its language, it's been reverting to, the valiant sons of Ulster talk of 1912, 1913, and going back to no surrender in the 17th century. But life has moved on, and we're not going back to that. So I do feel that Northern Ireland is going to end because unionism didn't have the generosity or imagination to share it. So people are going to look elsewhere, and they're going to look towards possibly a unified Ireland within Europe, which the majority of people, including Protestants here, wanted. 56% of people here voted to remain in the EU. That has to include a lot of unionists.
Yeah, and the thing I took from the book is when you asked the people that you interviewed about a united Ireland, there were very few, say Arlene Fosters, but there was very few people who said, that's it, I'm away, I'll be going. Most people were they said they didn't want it. But if it happened, that would be democracy. And that was from people living in the Shankill to people who were living out in the countryside. It seemed to be very much, they weren't resigned to the fact they'd rather not have it, but they would accept it. Did that surprise you?
To an extent it surprised me, but I think what surprised me more is the way that the DUP has gone out of its way to try to suggest that it's otherwise. They've summoned up the ghost of loyalist paramilitarism through the Loyalist Communities Council, which most of us had never heard of before the last year. to try to sort of frighten people into thinking, if you try to force a united Ireland on us, we have people coming after us who will potentially use violence again. But most people have no interest whatsoever in a return to violence, nor is there any capacity among loyalist paramilitaries to start up a campaign again. So it's a nonsense. And yeah, even within the DUP, I found people who were quite relaxed about the prospect that, well, if there's a poll and it goes against what we want, we'll live with that. But I mean, I actually think that it could resolve a lot of the divisive issues in Northern Ireland if there was a unified Ireland, because we would all be united then in our sense of grievance against every other part of Ireland. You know, it would all be, you know, look at the way they're treating us up here in the north.
We would just be like Donegal people.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Donegal people give off that they're not treated the same in the south, so we would just be all Donegal people then if it was a united Ireland. But parts of the book are quite funny as well. I didn't expect some of it to be as funny as it was, but the bits that I find sort of the kind of weird and the wonderful is the rise of an American type evangelical Christian drive-in, I was going to say mass, but they don't call it mass.
No, we don't know.
Drive-in service with, you know, these pastors who wear like head mics and they put cowboy music on and they wear cowboy boots and they're preaching the good word. Where do you think that comes from? I can't picture how that generated in the north.
It's been going on for quite a while. I mean, if you look at some of those big churches, what do you call the big church on the outskirts of Belfast? It's massive. Like, they fit thousands of people in there.
Loads of people.
Yeah, the big church at Whitewell, like I think you can fit 1,000 or a couple of thousand people in there, and people go. It's very strange because alongside that, you're seeing a real decline in attendance at the old style Protestant churches. You know, I talked to quite a lot of people who go to the old style churches, and they were saying like they'd be lucky if there was 30 or 40 people in the church, you know, a church that was supposed to seat several hundred. So it is strange, but it's very money driven. You know, my friend Anton and I went to the one in the Green Pastures in Ballymena. And at first, you know, I remember saying to Anton as we went in, because it was all very exciting and loud rock music, and I said to Anton, if I get saved, stop me, you know. And he said the same, you know, because we were quite excited about it at first. But then the message was so sort of tawdry, and in no time at all, there were flashing signs about all the different ways that you could give, you know, including putting your wee credit card in here, you know. And there was nothing inspiring about it at all, and the whole idea of it was that, you know, you had to just basically be obedient to God and put your wee credit card in. You know, it was. I didn't see that there was anything inspiring about it or anything that gave you a sense of any kind of, you know, religious sensibility about it. But it is definitely gaining a lot of converts. I mean, there were lots and lots of people there, big cars in huge car park.
Just when you were saying about if I'm being saved, stop me, my mama used to tell the story that the nuns at school told her that you get the call, and when she was about 12, she used to lie in bed going, please don't call me, please don't call me, please don't call me. But and on the ultra-Christian evangelical thing, you go and visit a pastor, Pastor Barry Halliday. For anyone who doesn't know him, he's kind of made his name on social media, and he's a pastor, and the activist, former activist, Wally Fraser, is actually buried in this man's backyard. And he makes these videos, and in one of the videos, you know, he's quoted telling Black Lives Matter protesters that if they don't like it here, they should go home. In another video, he's quoted as calling Catholics lesser breeds. So you took it upon yourself to go out and visit him at his house.
Yeah, well, I to be honest, I thought I was going to a church service, but when I arrived at the hall, it turned out there was nobody there. And then I wanted to, because I'd been told that Willie Fraser was buried in his back garden, and I wanted to see that before I left at least. So I went up to the house, and then this man arrived, jumped out of his car in a suit and ran into the house. So he said, yeah, the breaking of the bread is in the house today. Come on, you'll be welcome, you know. So I went in, and it was excruciatingly awkward because, I mean, all of those things, all of those videos I had watched, and I was horrified by them. I mean, I'm not sure if he was referring to Catholics as lesser breeds or if he was referring to black people as lesser breeds, but I think it was probably both, you know. But he was definitely saying, this is a white man's country, this is a Protestant country, you know. And he really is preaching a sort of extreme sectarianism that is quite rare to find now, actually, which is, it's good that it is quite rare. But anyway, so I went in, and what was really awkward about it was that they were incredibly welcoming to me, you know, and they were really nice to me. And it was very disarming to be being, you know, treated nicely by people who had such horrible, horrible politics, you know. And I just felt so clumsy and so out of place, you know, and when it came to communion, there was sort of this little tray of sliced pan and little glasses of what I assume was not alcohol, but probably some sort of fruit juice was passed around, and I found myself sort of saying, no thanks, I'm not saved, you know, like, and I just felt so stupid, like, why would you say a thing like that, you know, and I couldn't wait to be out of the place, you know, but he's a strange character because he preaches all this righteousness, but he is actually a convicted tax fraud. You know, he has a conviction for tax fraud, himself and his brothers, and he never says how that squares with his loyalty and the fact that he never appears without a sort of thicket of Union Jacks around him and a photograph of the Queen, you know.
And did you think it was important to have someone like that to kind of represent? Because there is an extreme still sectarianism, like on both sides. There is still those extreme kind of representatives, if you want to call them.
Yeah, and I thought it was strange that all of the leading figures in unionism went to Willie Fraser's funeral at that church. You know, I really think that they would have been very judgmental, to say the least, if the same thing had happened the other way around and a whole lot of people had gone to some extreme dissident Republican type ceremony in the nationalist Republican community, you know. But I think I wanted to show the diversity within the community, and there's no point in hiding from the fact that there still is that vein of very virulent sectarianism there. But I really think a lot of people don't want anything to do with it now.
Yeah, it's the situation in the book is totally bizarre. Yeah, and I just wanted to touch on, I'll stop talking about depressing things in a minute, but I just wanted to touch on, you talk about a good bit in the book about the unseen trauma of the Troubles, and we talk about trauma a lot in Northern Ireland and what people have lived through, and, you know, people who have lost, and that seems to be the trauma that we're willing to talk about, and the trauma that we are not willing to talk about is violence against women and domestic violence, and how that was something that was not talked about at all in the North, in either community, for a really long time. And obviously with your background you founded the Belfast Rape Crisis Network, and do you think it's something in the North that we all have our own stories from our own communities, but do you think it's something in the North that will ever look in the eye, like it'll ever be remembered as something about the Troubles?
I think it will be, because I think that more violence against women is getting worse. I think, you know, you are seeing more, you know, men killing families, you know, not just killing a woman, but killing children as well. And I know it sometimes happens the other way around, but the overwhelmingly gender-based violence is male on female violence. And when we started up the Rape Crisis Centre in the early 1980s, we used to get these journalists coming over mostly from the UK, and they would ring us up in advance and say, could you get me a Catholic woman who's been raped by an RUC man, and could you get me a Protestant woman who's been raped by an IRA man? And, you know, it was ridiculous. It was like we were this mail order catalogue, and they wanted this matching set. But I mean, of course, what we found as time went on was that it wasn't like that at all. Most of the violence was within families, within communities, you know, and where you were having men who were armed because they were supposedly, you know, defending the nation, defending their people, and they were using their macho status within that community to be violent to women and children, you know, and they had a certain protection. I mean, particularly because women didn't feel that they could speak outside of the community, you know, the whole sort of taboo on being a tout or say nothing. Who are you to talk about him? We'll sort that out. But if he's one of us, then we won't sort it out, you know, and you can just live with it. So there is a lot of that emerging now, and I think that it is being explored by feminist organisations in particular who aren't going to let it go, because it was unspoken for so long. But there was also a whole sort of thing of, you know, women are going to have to wait. That's always been the thing. You know, let's get this constitutional question, let's get the national question resolved, and then we'll see about women. And if you look back through Irish history, that's been the thing over and over and over again.
And in terms of politics now, do you think we are making enough effort in the North to have more women? Do you see politics as a welcoming place for women in the North when you look at Stormont, or even look at the Dáil?
Yeah, it's really interesting in the book, and it was the same with the first book, An Unsettled People. Quite a lot of women from all kinds of different classes and backgrounds talked about how it didn't do to be successful as a woman in the Protestant community. I can't say whether it's the same in the Catholic community because I haven't studied that and I'm not from that background, so I wouldn't have the same sort of feel for it. But quite a number of people, like Claire Sugden, who is a successful politician. I mean, she became Minister for Justice in the executive, I think at the age of 34 or something, and she was really good. And one of the first things she did actually was to try to get new violence against women legislation in. But she talked about how difficult it was for her, and she said that, you know, she just had a feeling that, you know, she had to sweat the small stuff all the time, where her civil servants would expect her to sort of attend to everything, like whether there was, you know, toilet rolls in the women's toilets and things, you know, and she said she just felt that they wouldn't have asked that of a man. You know, a man would have been expected to just sort of rise above all of that sort of stuff. And then a woman in Mid-Ulster was sort of saying that she was from a very working class background and she had done well at school, and it was kind of disapproved of, you know, that wasn't really what a woman was supposed to do. It is a very patriarchal society, and I think it is still very difficult for women to be successful here. But I mean, we both know, as journalists who primarily have our careers in the Republic, or at least I don't any more of my career in the Republic, it's more up here, but you're finding your way in the Republic, and it's definitely harder for women. You know, an awful lot of very banal guys rise seamlessly to the top of our profession, and there's lots of brilliant women who really have to fight their way to the top.
It also helps if your daddy or your uncle was a banal man. That's the way to move up. And just because you brought, this is my last question for Susan, and then we'll go to questions from the audience. You said earlier that you wrote the first book because you felt that Southerners didn't understand enough about Northern Protestants. I would argue that they still don't know enough about Northerners in general. And I just wanted to ask, I think the world and its wife knows about some of the experiences that Northerners have had with attitudes in the South. You've lived in Dublin for a really long time. Has attitudes towards Northerners changed in the last number of years that you've noticed?
Well, I think the fact that this book has been very successful in the Republic is very telling, you know, because the first book, I don't know whether it was successful in the Republic. I can't remember if there was a breakdown of where it sold, but this book is selling just as well in the Republic as it is in the North, both of which are a big surprise to me, but particularly the Republic because it goes against the notion that, I mean, when you're a journalist from the North, I'm sure you've had that experience of sitting at editorial meetings and saying, I've got this great story, it's about Derry, and sort of like you see the glaze forming over their eyes.
I have a hard time explaining that the North means north of Limerick.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. But it would appear that that attitudes are changing, that people are interested in the North, and I think maybe the question of unification is beginning to make people in the Republic feel that, well, we'd better learn a bit more about it, we'd better understand a bit more about it, you know. But, I mean, certainly when the first book came out, there was I think a lot of people in the Republic, when the Good Friday Agreement was signed, thought, oh, thank God, that's that shower out of our hair, you know, we don't feel we'll have to think about them anymore.
Yeah.
But it would appear that now that there isn't the same level of violence up here, that maybe there is a bit less fear of the North. But certainly when I was in the North, when I was in the Republic and a Northerner in the past, I definitely felt I had to sort of soften myself a bit, you know. I had to, you know, you come across as aggressive in the Republic when, as far as you're concerned, you're being on your best behaviour.
Yeah, I think I'm being very polite and people tell me to calm down.
Yes, yeah.
All right, thank you very much, folks. Thanks everybody for coming. I had a really nice night, and I hope everybody else did.
It's so lovely to be
Susan.
in a room with people, isn't it? It's just great.
I've never done anything like this before either, so I hope it's all right. But thank you so much for everything, and I had a really great night. Thank you.